Good evening, afternoon, morning, or whatnot, everybody. Today we're going to look at a very exciting game by Bobby Fischer. I'd like to mention that January 17, I believe Bobby passed away in Iceland some time ago, I believe 2008, from the illness. And he is no longer with us, but his chess games will always be very special. And his contribution to chess really is amazing. He's played so many good players. He defeated so many great players in good games. Was very energetic player. So I'd like to review some of his chess legacy, particularly this game against Boris Spassky that was played in 1972 World Chess Championship, where Bobby illustrated how you play with a bishop. Now, bishop versus knight is sort of like a perpetual battle, a forever battle of two pieces that kind of vie for supremacy. Here you've got knight on d7, doesn't seem to be badly placed, and the bishop on e2, that seems to have a fair amount of space.
Wait a
And
second, we're skipping the opening? We're not seeing the opening?
we're not seeing the opening. We're just going to straight to the middle game.
All
I
right.
think it's a very exciting middle game here. Now, how do you play with the bishop? It's always been a big question. What do you do with it? Do you just sit and aim at things and hope they fall? Usually that's not going to work. Now, what do you do when you have a bishop versus knight? Generally speaking, a practical advice would be to open the position up, give bishop something to attack.
Right.
Bishop is actually a great attack supporter. Like bishop and a queen always make a great pair. Bishop, queen, and rooks make even better team. And in this position, Bobby Fischer has bishop, queen, and rooks. And he makes a really good use of it. Now, what do you do first? First, you need to make sure that the bishop's scope and influence is actually increasing and its position is getting stronger and more influential. So you need to give him more space. Sure, you attack a6 pawn, but what good does that do? You can't even take it. Yes, you can play bishop g4, attack e6. That can be guarded multiple times. And again, one attacker makes no difference. Usually chess is a team game. You need to make sure you team your pieces, play well together. So what Bob Fischer does is begins to open up diagonals and files for the rooks at the same time. So the first move that he plays is e4. Challenges the pawn chain.
Wait a second,
Now,
that
knight
was that was a free
f6.
pawn, wasn't it?
It was a free pawn, but the pawn was actually not captured because I think taking the pawn would lead to a fairly large number of extremely poorly placed pawns, and Spassky did not go for that. I'm not exactly sure what Fischer had in mind here, but I suspect it would be something relatively simple. Let's say he goes, for example, bishop to g4. What what would be played to defend the pawn? You probably want to play queen, I don't know, queen f6.
Sure.
And let's say from here he goes queen to b3. Now the pawn is beginning to feel a little bit of a heat here. What do you do? Rook e8. Okay, sounds good. And at that point, something like rook e1.
Mm.
If you look at this position, somewhere there will be a crack in Block's defense. Whether it's going to be e4, c5, or e6 is an open question, but there has to be a problem there somewhere because there's just too many things that are not safe.
Right.
When you have a position where multiple pieces are under attack, it's just a matter of time before one of them will collapse. So maybe here also another move I'm thinking, or setting up a little tactic,
Oh, right,
takes
right.
e5. Also kind of taking a view of the knight, so the knight cannot go to e5. And at the same time, we're
Oh.
attacking the square e4. So possibly that, and let's say queen goes to d4, fighting is squeeze into c6, beginning to attack more. So possibly this, maybe some other ways. Like for instance, now if you go queen d5, I think this can actually be held more or less. Instead of queen to a4, we have a better move.
Hmm.
b2 takes e4. Is this a winning position? I'm not sure, but it's a position where it's just a matter of time before pawn e6 is going to fall. You can't move the knight to f8. You go to f6, e6 falls.
Pretty interesting in a lot of those lines. You're attacking all three of these guys, so it's significant.
Just to check what the computer's opinion of this position is, I think there's possibility there's more than a way to play here. The computer actually likes queen e3 or queen b3.
Hmm.
And variety of moves here. So I think queen e3 is the one that seems to be most liked.
And does it like bishop g4 on the second move there?
I did seem to like bishop g4. Let's take a look what could possibly be played. Actually likes queen h3.
Tip of my tongue.
Queen h3, interesting. I thought that this was going to be a pretty good move. I felt like this would position the bishop most flexible because you attack e6. But the computer feels like this is not the best. It feels like the best is queen h3.
A lot going on. I'm
Also an
excited to see this
interesting move
game.
would be
Yeah.
rook d1. Yeah, rook d1 is another move I like. I think this is a better move from the standpoint of a move order because here you have a choice of bishop c4.
Okay.
That's the ticket right there.
Cool. Well, I got my question answered, and it sounds like in the game he did not take the pawn, and the game proceeded otherwise.
Yeah, that's the computer suggestion here. So in the game, Spassky did not take the pawn. In the game, Spassky played d4.
Thank you, by the way. I got my question answered, yeah.
You're welcome. Now, after d4, the computer basically heavily favors white. Now, why? I think if you actually look at the pawn formation here, you can see all the challenges that come with it. Now, c4 square is permanently lost. e6 pawn remains very weak. c5 pawn remains weak. And white actually has a possibility of f4, f5. And Bob Fischer immediately plays f4. Now, e5 square is no longer attainable for the knight. And now there's multiple things beginning into play. Bishop g4 and queen h3 definitely. Bishop c4, queen h3, and f5 definitely possible. So suddenly, just in two moves, the position has changed very much into favor of white. So objectively speaking, it sounds like d takes e4 would have actually been better. d4 looks good because it keeps the pawn together, but actually, as the best defense, it fails. So queen e7 was played, and Bob Fischer plays e5. Very classical move. It removes f6 square away from the knight. It fixes e6 at the weak spot. And now all kinds of tactical problems begin. b4 becomes an issue to pay attention to. And if c takes b4, rook takes c8. Now, secondly, bishop g4 and queen h3 become very, very unpleasant, as well as queen b3 and bishop c4, followed by f5. So suddenly the position becomes to be very difficult to maintain. So here, I analyzed this position. I felt like knight b6 would have been a better move. Because two things happen after this. Bishop c4 is no longer possible without giving up a nice bishop. And secondly, maybe in some positions, knight d5 with knight e3.
Yeah.
I felt like here rook fd1 is probably necessary, threatening rook takes d4, preventing knight d5. And then after a5, I feel like b4 cannot be played very quickly. Rook takes d4 is not yet possible. And I don't have any doubt that white stands better in this position after something like maybe f5, queen g5 still has some counterplay, but maybe bishop f3, bishop g4.
Sure.
So here it feels like knight d5 cannot be yet played because of some tactical issues. And if you cannot play knight d5, improving the position.
But wait a second. Hold on. So if you, hold on, wait. So if you go here, whoops. Oh no. Hold on. Can I move it for a second? So if you go knight to do only one's can move the mouse at the same time. Okay, so if you go here, and then bishop takes.
Yeah.
So okay, right, okay. Bishop takes, and then takes back, and rook takes d4. Your queen, the queen is defended. That's not a pin. C takes
Well,
there.
there is a second pin
Oh,
there,
there's a
though.
second pin.
There's a
Nice.
second pin. You see, there is lots of stuff going on here, and unfortunately, none of that is good for black. You've got very much an open king here on f7, and it's just probably a matter of time before there's some way to break this defense, whether it's queen b3 or queen h3 or queen f3. One of those things will probably work out. Let's
Quite
see
a
that
bit
in this
going on in
position.
this position. I can see what you mean about Bobby Fischer's energetic style.
Yeah, this wasn't played. I felt like knight b6 would have been at least kind of like an active defense. Instead, Spassky actually played something else. He actually went rook b8. I like this move on one hand because it takes the rook away from danger on c file. No more rook takes d4 or b4 tactics, and it does attack b2 pawn. On the other hand, it is relatively passive position. White can simply play b3 at any point, and I feel like the attack is going to take place on the king side, so it's a little bit away from the action. And Bobby immediately played bishop c4. And I suspect in this position, Spassky may have overlooked something. Like, probably I'm beginning to think that he was thinking of knight b6, but here Bobby has this little tricky move.
Hmm.
And you can see that the queen gets captured after bishop takes c6.
Oh, nice.
Six falls at the same time.
Nice.
So if you can't play knight b6, now f5 is a very serious threat. So the king had to go to h8, and Fischer immediately played queen h3, forcing the knight to f8. And you can see here the difference between the knight and the bishop. The knight's position is passive, out of play. The bishop's position is active. The pawns are safely blocked. So Bobby simply plays b3, makes the rook on b8 irrelevant. From here on out, it's just a matter of time before this position is. What needs to be done is White simply can play something like rook c2 e1, open up the position for the bishop, and then with two rooks, queen, bishop in the area of the king side, there's simply no counterplay, so it's just a question of finding decisive below. So Spassky plays a5, Bobby plays f5. Classic. You gotta open the position up for rook. Great team with open position. So he takes f5, rook takes f5. Also was possible queen f5. I think that's just basically nitpicking. You can probably play queen f5 and rook. You can see difference between piece placement. One side has active pieces aiming at the king, aiming at various squares. Rook f7 is, and the other side has rook on a7 and b8, largely bystanders. Now, the game is positionally decided. So Spassky here played knight h7, setting up a cheapo. Now try to guess what cheapo was he setting up, Ryan.
Hmm.
Cheapo is a tactic where you basically set up a cheap shot.
Hmm. I don't know if I'm gonna get this one.
Well, he's big. Rook f7 is kind of
Oh
begging to be played, right? Rook f7 begging to be played, but it's a bad move.
no, I guess I don't see it.
Knight g5, knight fork,
Oh, just that.
and
Okay.
see
Oh.
knight fork. And if you take on e7, he actually has a check.
Right. Right.
And then the exchange is lost, and the victory has been clearly lost as well.
Oops.
So, of course, Fischer did not go for that. He simply played rook f1, kind of dominating the f file and preparing rook f7 a little bit later, connecting the rooks, removing the rook from c1. Look at that. It's actually a very classical move. What is the rook doing on c1? Not much anymore. It actually is a weakness here because if in some positions, if not knight g5, then queen g5 can be played. You connect the rooks, you control the f file a little bit firmer, and you removed yourself from a possible attack square. So Spassky goes queen to d8, and now Bobby Fischer begins an assault against g7 square. Now, what needs to happen for that? First of all, you want to make sure that before you go rook f7, you actually threaten that square. So Fischer plays queen to g3. So
And
at
notice
this
too, like
point,
there's a lot of skill that's required here. I mean, I think a lot of players might go like rook to f7, but this would actually completely forfeit the advantage. Just like you were saying with that knight g5 stuff.
yeah, knight g5 would be a very unpleasant surprise. So always remember that when you attack something, the best attacking point or square or piece is the one where you already have an attack, where you're kind of building up on what you've already have built. So rook f7 attacks a square that is not yet attacked. Queen g3 and then rook f7 is going to be much better because it's going to be threatening checkmate, right? So here rook went to e7 and Bobby Fischer played h4, and that was basically a deciding move because now knight g5 is no longer an option. Rook f7 is a threat, and the game. Spassky played rook b7, trying to protect f7 square from invasion. Fischer played e6. Rook went to c7, queen 5, and now rook f7 is pending, and queen e8 was played. He's still trying to set up some kind of a trap. Now, for instance, can rook f7 be played? The answer is suddenly he is back from the dead.
Uh-oh.
And boom, you've got a loss of the queen.
Yikes.
Not nice. So, in the winning position, be patient, do not rush, and always look for captures and checks. So Fischer simply played a4. In a situation like this, a move like a4 is extremely annoying because you have a horrible position where you don't have anything to do, and you're practically at Zugzwang. So your opponent just basically passes the move to you and says, hey.
Yeah.
So that's what Fischer is doing here. Queen d8. I suspect right about here, both players were approaching the time pressure. Remember, the time when this game was played, they were playing with a time control mostly. Um, and
I'm sorry, how many hours?
2.5 hours of 40 moves, I think it was
Okay.
a standard. Most likely, Bobby was kind of biding time. The next few moves, he's just making waiting moves, most likely just kind of getting to the area has been completed. And now he's positioning himself for a checkmating assault, basically setting up. So what happened here? Rook takes b3 was a possibility. Wow, did Bobby Fischer miss that move?
I'm guessing no.
Not likely. He actually prepared an ugly response to it. Queen takes c7.
Ooh, nice.
Ooh, yikes. And you can't really take this guy without being checkmated.
That bishop.
No, you can't do that. Now it becomes really boring. Queen e8, queen e4. So he's all set
Boring?
for
What's this? Isn't boring? What are you talking about?
Well, it's getting boring for black. What do? You
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So he goes knight f6, trying to stop the attack, and Fischer sacks the exchange. And
Whoa.
here, he didn't really think of anything, so he resigned. Why did he resign? Well, obviously, two problems here. The biggest threat that's actually coming up is queen f4. So let's say you go here, right? First of all, obviously, rook takes h6 by itself is an unpleasant threat. But queen f4 is also extremely unpleasant. Two threats, actually three threats. Queen takes c7, rook f8 check, and queen h6.
Wow.
All of them are deadly. All of them are deadly. So you have to take this guy here.
Wait, we got to do some arrows for that. That's a pretty awesome moment. Hold on. So there's this one. Sorry. So it's this one here. Whoops. You gotta let go of the mouse, or I can't do it. So it's this one.
You got that one.
This one.
You got that one. And
And
he got
yeah, cool.
so tough game.
Yeah.
So after rook takes f6, Boris Spassky resigned. He kind of trusted that Bobby Fischer knows what.
But
Very nice game. It's a great illustration how strong bishop can dominate poorly placed knight.
definitely, this is an awesome game. Okay, wait. So what about King G7?
Um, King G7, interesting move. I think the same Queen F4 would just be extremely annoying.
Hmm.
Mm.
I'm pretty much
Rook
convinced, but I
G6,
do want to see the rest if it's okay. So Queen H5.
Queen H5. Okay, cool move. Bishop E2.
Ooh.
Now, if you take the bishop, you get mated very nicely.
Ooh, nice.
Very cool.
Awesome game.
And the Boris goes down. You know, I remember that movie by was a Guy Ritchie, Boris the Blade. I don't know if you've ever seen him.
uh,
It was a great movie. I suggest you rent it. It should be on Netflix or someplace.
okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll do that. This
Boris
was
the Blade.
awesome. Thank you. Are we looking at another one today? What are we doing?
Yes, we will.
Yay.
Let's take a look at another game, not by Bobby Fischer, but by his contemporary chess player, Mr. Leonid Stein, who unfortunately passed away relatively young. I think it was like early 40s.
Hmm.
I had some sort of a heart issue.
Hmm.
And in this position here, you can see how Bobby dominated Spassky, who was a great player at the time. Stein actually competed with Fischer in many tournaments in the end of 1960s and was considered to be one of the contenders, maybe not necessarily for the title, but at the top 10 players in the world. And in the next game, we're going to see his game against Nikolai Krogius, who was probably, I would say, a B or C level grandmaster. And this is also a great game on the use of diagonals and the use of bishops. Now, if you look at this position and you play chess long enough, you know that this is a King's Indian defense.
Well, that was
And
an
we
interesting
actually
that,
get a
that, that
lot
was
of
an interesting term.
illustrations.
I've never heard that before. A B or C level grandmaster. Did you just make that up, or is that common lingo that I wasn't aware of?
Well, I mean, it's basically like, okay, let's say you got movie actors. So you got A list, and then you got a B list, and C list, and a D list. Like, okay, if you
Okay.
can't get anybody from the A list, okay, let's take a look what's in the B list. And if you can't get the B listers, okay, who do we get from the C
Okay.
list? I
Okay.
think it was comedian Cassie Griffin that was written a book that being on a D list or something to that effect. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
So
Cool. Just checking.
Krogius was probably what we call a middle of a grandmaster. He's never qualified for any interzonals. He never played any kind of like uh, Fischer kind of a player, or never competed against stellar people like this. He was probably one of those Soviet grandmasters that competed in some Soviet championship and finished somewhere in the top, you know, 10 out of 20 or something, or top 15 out of 20, somewhere there. So this is why I call him B or C Grandmaster. So he's definitely a Grandmaster. He definitely earned the title, but he was nowhere near the neighborhood of Stein or Fischer for that matter, even more so. So in this position, actually, you could see that he actually made a fair amount of progress with white on the king side, and he is just about to crown his achievement with knight d5.
Right.
You can take a look at this position. Once white knight gets to d5, and it doesn't even matter whether it's b knight or d knight, he's going to completely seal black's pieces there. The dark square bishop on g7, pretty much in the King's Indian, opening this guy up as a dream coming true. But if the knight gets to d5, the bishop on f8 pretty much stands on f8 or g7 until the end of the game, never see the light of day. So here, Stein plays a very interesting move, and to be fair, it's a controversial move. It wasn't a winning move by any means. It is still a position that I think is actually better for white, even after what he did. But Stein was kind of a player that really liked tactics, was very good at King's Indian tactics, all kinds of Sicilian tactics, played very sharply. And he basically felt like if the knight gets to d5, he's probably looking at the game where he's going to be lucky to draw.
Oh wait. So black wins this. Hold on. Can I flip around the board? Give me a second. Let me go like this. Hold on. Can I go like this here? So I gotta switch this around, and then we're gonna flip this guy like so. And do you normally flip around the board, or do you pretty much always look at it from white side? I've seen a lot of authors actually do that. Even if black wins the game that they're reviewing, they'll look at it from white side. Is that standard? Why do people do that?
It doesn't really matter to me. I see it the same way. I usually use it just from one side because I'm kind of used to it. Just from the sake of point of, it's more like being used to it as opposed to anything special.
Okay, okay.
So in this situation here, what is normal thing for black to do? Normal thing for black to do is to play something like this. Knight would go to d5. So how these guys are not moving for me.
What?
G5. Why is it not moving?
What happened? What's the deal?
Mind control this thing.
Yeah, you are. Let's see here. Why would that not work? Use the arrows or something? Okay, that works.
Oh, G5. Yeah, this is a standard thing you do in the King's Indian. You play G5, knight goes to D5, you play H5, knight takes, knight D5. So I don't know about that one. I don't like this particular way. I actually like bishop C4 here. Bishop move. Yeah, bishop c4. You can see in this position, d5 is fully controlled by white. Next thing they can do, queen b3, putting even more pressure on this diagonal. And if you make all these swaps and trade all these pieces, probably not going to get any attack on it. So what Stein did, he concluded that the bishop's participation here is a critical. He plays d5. His opponent actually takes the pawn, bishop c5 check, king h1. So the king looks very peaceful and nice on the square h1.
Sure.
Until you see that there is actually something really interesting brewing here. He is preparing knight h5. The idea of queen h4. So at first, Krogas played knight. What did he do here? d5, knight takes d5, bishop c5. Now here he goes knight h5. Now the idea is very simple. Queen h4 and knight g3 checkmate. At first, Krogas actually defended really well. He goes queen e1, doesn't let the queen. And here Stein basically feels like, well, I gotta go for it. I cannot really play positionally here. I either execute the attack or I lose. So he sacks the knight, plays queen g5.
Wow.
The intent is fairly obvious. He just wants to do queen h5 checkmate. So obviously he saw that g4 is possible. He plays h5.
And what was the point of
Now,
g4?
one more move, he wins.
What was the point of g4?
Well, you get control h5 because else the queen is going to get there. Let's say you do something silly like bishop b2, then you...
Right, and checkmate.
So you got to play g4. You have to control that square. Now he goes h5 because his intent is to take on g4 and play queen h6 check. And here Krogas again comes on top. He goes g3 and king g2. Now he's prepared to play rook h1 to meet the queen.
I'm sorry, can I try this? What if we click this? Is that what did it? Okay, I think now you're going to have an easier time reviewing the game. Yeah. I think now you should be able to navigate away. Try it now. Okay, that's what did it. There's a little button in the bottom right there.
Okay, so this is a very interesting moment in the game I'd like to talk about because right here, the situation is very simple. Now, we can take on f3, in which case you're probably going to take with the rook, or with the bishop for that matter. And there is no obvious checkmate. We cannot take on g3, our queen is under attack. We cannot play queen h5 or h6 and checkmate on h3 because he's going to play rook h1. So first thing that Stein does, he actually does really well. He brings another attacker into the game. So he plays rook A to F8.
Nice.
So, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how many pieces there are. What matters is how many pieces actually play. The rook on A8 was a dead anchor, so he's playing it to F8. Now he's potentially at some positions will open up the F file and attack F3. So here, Krogus plays bishop G2. Again, good developing move. And at this moment here, Stein made a mistake. And it's very easy to make a mistake in a very complex position like this. I actually couldn't understand what his intent was initially, but then I realized that he basically figures that he either needs to play knight to g5 or he needs to play the pawn g4. So he actually played queen h6 over his threatened mate, and after his opponent played rook to h1 and he went queen to g7. It looks really weird and strange. Why would you do something like this? But now he is prepared to play knight g5 to pressure f3. Or he also prepared to play g5, take on f3, and then play g4. So the pawn advance here is coming. This, however, in my opinion, was not the best move. What was the best move was this one. G takes f3. And after rook takes f3, queen g4. Now we're suddenly threatening checkmate on h3.
But you're walking into a discovered attack. The bishop's on e2. What are you doing? That queen's not safe there.
What do you discover attack? If you take on f4, queen h3, there's no discovered attack.
Ooh, pretty.
There is an attack, but there is not an attack by white. And actually, it's actually a really cool checkmate if you think about that. Look at
that. Cool. I like that.
So you can't really do the discovery. It does look scary, but it doesn't work. Now, after queen h1, then knight goes to g5. Now you see that all of these things are coming together for black. Now all these pieces are beginning to swarm near the king. f3 is under attack. Black simply threatens to take on f3, bishop f3, and queen takes g3. If you take rook f4, then queen h3 check. Takes, bishop takes. King h2, pawn takes, bishop e6. It's a mind-boggling position, but I think in the end of the day,
I love these kind of positions. By the way, I love just complicated messes like this. I wouldn't say I'm great at them, but they're so exciting. I love these kind of things.
Yeah, this is a really cool position. I think in this position, black roughly holds. I wouldn't vouch for it because I think white pawns are still pretty dangerous, but I don't really see how the pawns take over because you need to remove the bishop from d6, and this guy's probably not going to volunteer to get away. And the pawn b is stopped for now, so I'm not sure this would have been a winning position for white. I think black is actually up on exchange here for a cost of a couple of pawns, but the position to me looks very complex. So this is what I think Stein should have done. Now, he elected the road that I think was actually not optimal, but actually ended up actually played instead queen h6, rook h1, queen g7. Now, g takes f4 was a good move. E takes f4, and here Mr. Krogus again came out was a really nice move. e5. I'm sorry, no, first he played. Now, what's the point?
Jeez, I don't know. Boy, knight e4, knight e4.
He probably wants to play knight e4 in some situation.
Okay.
But also, he does not let the queen attack c3 square, among other things, and does not. I think in this position, it's more like a anchor for f6. When I come to f6, that's a possibility. Queen takes on e5 is a very confusing situation that ended up actually being won by black. But I think here, Krogus messed up. He should have played rook h6. What did that do? Well, it attacks c6 square among a few things. Falls f6 square a little bit tighter. Let's say the queen goes to f5. Then bishop to c1 defends the knight. Then after all these exchanges, black doesn't really have enough firepower here to win. In fact, there's a bit of a counterattack coming up. Rook h8, king g7, queen h6.
Right, right.
If you go king g7, knight may take on f6. And you can kind of see that the position has become, at the very minimum, not favorable to black. There's all kinds of things are coming up, like bishop, a lot of tactics that are probably going to be favorable.
And I mean, I'm convinced, but just for the people listening and everything, I mean, what's the material count right now? Is it totally settled or what? Because I'd probably like to see a few more moves.
Well, at this point, black is down a piece. So according to the engine, it's a 6-point lead. And you can't play g4 because queen is hanging, and knight e4 and bishop b2 are coming up. So you clearly have your work cut out for you.
I'm convinced, but if it's okay, could we just see a few more moves? Just sample off the computer. Yeah.
Yeah, this is basically the computer line. Now rook d7 check is coming up. Bishop b2 fork is coming up.
But g4, we got some momentum with these pawns against the king, right?
We would love to have that momentum, but it's hard to come by.
Whew.
So we have all of that stuff. It's all wild and crazy, but I think at the end of the day, it ends up being bad for black.
All right, I'm satisfied. Thanks. Let's keep it going.
Now, we can kind of see that the position is so confusing and complicated with so many different possibilities that Mr. Krogus here walked into a trap. He played f takes g4 thinking, well, you can't really play f3 here. It's not going to do any good because after bishop takes f3, queen attacks the queen.
Mm-hmm.
And after this check, queen takes e5, rook f2, king h3, rook f3, queen g3, white wins.
Wow.
Because after all that excitement is over, white is still up a rook.
I think this is officially my favorite game we've ever covered.
I
love this one.
The game was a lot of fun, but here's Mr. Stain's contribution to the game. He goes queen takes e2 check.
Okay. What?
Very cool. Now, what do you do after this? You could take with the knight or the queen. He took with the queen, and after f3, he basically went downhill.
Man.
You can kind of see that these guys are overwhelming.
Okay, yeah. Jeez. Okay, then you get to get the bishop.
He that check or not, but now he's down a rook, and the end game looks very dreadful.
Right, right.
Now, the big question is, why didn't you take with the knight? What's the point?
Sure, yeah.
Well, the reason was actually interesting. Let's say knight takes on e2. The computer says bishop takes d5 is the best move. You have to go king f1. This is one of those weird positions where one player has a critical lead, but the threat of f3 and bishop g2 mate is definitely something to keep in mind. So here, let's say you go bishop b4 in an attempt to trade off a few pieces. Check, mister. You have to take another check. You're going to go somewhere, probably not somewhere where you're going to be checked again. So king h1.
Yeah.
Bishop takes b4. Now, can we take the bishop? Yes, we can. But now the pawn gets dangerously close to the promotions.
That's crazy.
The rook goes to e1, check. King goes to g2, trade, queen trade, and rook e8. And this is one of those weird positions where one player has a queen and the other one doesn't. But unfortunate part for white is there is no way to move the queen. So essentially, you're kind of playing without a queen, even though technically you have it.
Yeah.
So the knight basically comes and helps to promote.
And the king can't keep it at bay?
How can the king keep the knight in bay? They're not really um,
Yeah,
of
just
the
knight
same
knight b4 or something, or
of
yeah.
the same material here. There's not. I mean, the computer basically gives some kind of a draw. I don't really wait. This is about. I think the computer gives like rook e5, and this is almost a Zugzwang. Next move at some point is knight f4 and knight.
Yeah, just gotta get the
And
knight to
he's gonna
d3.
do
Yeah.
it is a good question. You maybe can play like, okay, you go king g3. So perhaps first thing he needs to do is to bring the king over. He's not in any particular rush because if you look at it, what can really.
Yeah, yeah, right, right.
So I would simply just go here and just walk and eat the pawns first and then do something.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
So if you play b6, I think c takes b6, a takes b6, a takes b6. Eventually going to lose the c pawn. But if you move the queen, the pawn promotes. That's basically kind of like the bottom line.
Right, right, makes sense. All right, well, I think that's gonna do it for this game. What are your the concluding thoughts of today's lesson?
Well, the concluding thoughts of today's lesson is, don't be afraid to sacrifice material if it allows you to bring more. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how many pieces each side has. What matters is how many pieces actually. The important thing is for the attacking side, more pieces than the defense. Actually, look at this position here. Really, practically all black pieces attack white king. Total of two bishops, knight, queen, and two rooks. Whereas white has, I think it's fair to say, the rook a1 out of play. So in terms of material, even though black technically is down a piece, on a battlefield, forces are approximately even. And attacking the king with pawns and pieces is always a very fun thing to do and very difficult to defend from because it's not like you're going to lose a couple of pawns on the king queen side. You're going to lose the king, you're going to lose the game.
Right, right.
So, very interesting position, very interesting play. But
Yeah.
very, objectively speaking, it doesn't sound like he was actually winning in the game if his opponent played the best move. I think bishop d2 was a mistake. The engine says that rook h would have been best. The reason is that he really needed to stop the queen because if you actually look at the queen's position on g4, if you succeed in attack against g3, that is a good position. But if the attack does not succeed, you actually take in space of the knight.
Right, right. Well,
The
awesome
knight
stuff.
on h7 ends up a dead weight.
Thank you so much, Yuri. Appreciate it. Yeah, for this lesson and everything.
Yeah, it's a fun game.
Yeah,
What a great couple of players, Stein and Fischer.
yeah. What are we gonna look at next time?
We're going to continue working Bobby Fischer's legacy and look at some more games.
Yay! All right, looking forward to it. Thanks. Cool.
Bye, Ryan. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.